There once was a young person named Lynn who loved children so much that she went to school and studied human development and started an intentionally inclusive home child care center. Children thrived as their imaginations were allowed to wander, their spirits nurtured as they learned important skills like sharing and listening to others, as well as themselves. For sharing and listening to others as well and themselves is an important skill. For years, Lynn offered a lovely place for families to learn and grow, to care about one another. And one day, a small voice said, "It might be time to change."
And there was once a young person named Wendy who loved music so much that Wendy went to school and studied music therapy and worked with individuals and families with different kinds of diagnoses and skills and needs. People thrived as music touched their hearts, as they themselves engaged in rhythm and play, and healing happened as they listened to one another sing, share challenges, and drum their feelings, being heard in ways that they hadn't been before, raising their voices in ways that they didn't know that they could do alongside others on their own rhythmic journey. And then one day, a voice said, "It might be time for a change."
Both of these people made their way, one from Corvallis, Oregon, and one from San Diego, California, to Berkeley, California, and Stark King School for the Ministry. They learned many, many, many things about themselves, Unitarian Universalism, and ministry. They fell in love and were eventually married and then ordained into ministry. After some searching, they served a congregation in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas. And one day, a small voice said, "It might be time for a change."
And so those two did some searching again, and they found their way to Schenectady, New York, and a completely different place where just about everything was different, unfamiliar and new. They would learn many things about themselves and ministry. And after a couple of years, everything changed with very little warning. COVID-19 was spreading fast, and many well informed voices said it was time for a change.
And change we did. The buildings closed, and worship, and then religious education, and then meetings and connecting all went online via Zoom. There was a wild and steep learning curve, and the very real threat of danger everywhere. Do you remember that? It was wild and weird. Each decision needed to weigh that much. And then we had to think about, okay, what is happening with the church? Is that everything that we do at church is potentially life threatening? We gather together inside, we sing, we shake hands, we hug, we pass things to one another. Okay, that's pretty much everything that is dangerous. All right, now what? And these two gathered with expertise around them so they could make the best decisions they could. Things continued to change at a rapid speed, and the weight of responsibility was a lot to carry. But carry it they did, because that's what we do. And because we know that we are interdependent. And unfortunately, so are germs. So we changed, and we changed, and we changed, and we changed, and we changed again, pivoting so often and so many times that we were practically revolving.
And loss upon loss began to pile up. And the weariness of having to keep learning some new way to do their job began to catch up with them. The strain of some people being happy with their decisions and other people being unhappy and offering only criticism without seeking to understand was painful. And things continued to change. And eventually, we got some equipment and some staff and some additional volunteers. And we were able to start gathering together again, to worship together again, still with some changes, still with lots of decisions. Vaccinations and boosters and masking are making a huge difference in what we can do. And there was a small voice that said, "You have changed so much. Maybe it's time to spend a little time resting so you can begin integrating everything you've learned and then figuring out what this means for your ministry and the congregation." It's time to ask ourselves those open questions. What are we afraid of? Who are we all now? What do we need to let go of? What do we need to carry forward? It's time for some space for reflecting. Sometimes you got to do when the Spirit says do. It's time for sabbatical. We often recognize that many of us have some sense of what others do in their work. I know what a doctor does when I'm in the room with the doctor, but I don't have any idea what a doctor does the rest of the time. And you might know what a teacher does if they're in the classroom with you. And we know what some teachers do outside of it a bit. But unless you're a teacher, you don't really know. And much of what we do is invisible to the people that we serve, except for about an hour and 15 minutes each week.
So some of what we are putting down is responsibility for worship. It takes typically between 16 and 24 hours to put together this hour and 15 minutes every week. To do the research, the reflecting, the writing, the editing. That's part of it. We talk to other colleagues, they take about the same amount of time on average in that realm. It takes lots of communication and lots and lots and lots and lots of collaboration. Thank you, Maria, and staff and volunteers, lots and lots of collaboration. And we are gently laying down some of our other responsibilities too, so that we can tend to that weariness, to tend to our grief, to tend to our professional and our personal relationship. We're carving out space for some spiritual practices that will build up our resilience. More being, less doing. More life, less work. You got to do when the Spirit says do.
Someone way wiser than us said, "A Sabbath is a good thing, and a sabbatical is even better." Just as fields need to rest and be replenished for a future year of growing, so too do humans. We need time to rest in our lives, don't we? Yeah. We are profoundly grateful for the wisdom and for the opportunity to embark in this ancient practice of sabbatical, and for those who will be tending to those responsibilities while we are away. We will miss you. We will miss you. Yeah. And when we return, we will check our mailboxes, and we would love to find some notes or pictures if you feel like leaving them for us while we're away. And while we're gone, we're going to have new experiences, and we're going to come back with new stories.
Exactly. And they might sound like that.
Yes.
You got to rest when the Spirit says rest.